I'm not convinced that we've seen the end of violence. I think that disruption is what causes that sort of upheaval. And I think that naturally, if these sorts of projects succeed, disruption is inevitable, just because even if it's a better way, it still is a different way. And so that requires, I mean, it just, there's no way you get to that without upheaval. But I think that it's also interesting to talk about, you know, we're talking about an information age and an information economy. This is not the first time something like that has happened. There have been ages of enlightenment before, and they have also centered around informational things like books. I think that there have been oligarchies and keepers of knowledge who have, you know, through religion or other means, done a pretty good job of controlling large populations simply because most people don't understand what's really going on. And I sort of see a similar danger here as we get further into a cryptographic, you know, world. Those words can kind of just become meaningless. They can become buzzwords, indicators of an entire class, rather than actually explanations of what's happening. So I think that the open source movement does a lot to address that. But, you know, it has been interesting watching the Bitcoin developers, some of the vocal ones over the last month or so, talking about some of the protocols that are coming to be built on top. You know, for a long time on this show, we've talked about one of the, my favorite certainly, and I think everybody hears, features about Bitcoin is that it doesn't care who you are, doesn't care what you want to do with the blockchain. It just cares that you follow the rules, pay the fees required, and then you get to do whatever it is that you want to do. But recently, there's been sort of a hardline stance against not really a hardline stance, that's the wrong way to put it. There's just been some friction. Just it seems like the Bitcoin development team doesn't really want protocols like Mastercoin or Counterparty building on top and using the blockchain to store their own types of transactions. So I'm kind of curious, you know, what you guys think about that development broadly speaking. Is there ever a situation under which the blockchain under which something is not okay to do with the blockchain that you can conceptualize?
I think the blockchain is a neutral platform, and as a neutral platform, it carries the cultural conversation and language of value exchange of the society above it. And that will express every variety of expression that's being created by the society above it. Good, bad, evil, ugly, wonderful, charitable, giving, every possible expression of transfer of value is expressed on top of this neutral platform. It's important to separate the tool from the use that those who use it put it to. And, you know, in a broader sense, I think that it provides a platform that isn't really designed to create change or to oppose existing structures. It simply doesn't care about them. It's designed to completely ignore all of the existing structures and provide a new structure. It was never designed to oppose. It was simply designed to be, and in being, it just ignores the existing structures, and it allows people to express all possible expressions of transfer of value. Just take it.
So I would tend to agree with you, and I think it's a little weird, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable seeing, you know, this sort of conflict, because it does feel like there's a little bit of an ego trip going on here. And again, I'm not going to call out any specific developers. It's not all of them. I am not painting all developers with a broad brush, as some would say. But the ones that have been vocal about it have seemed to have been vocal about it because they don't like the way that it's being done. And so I can, again, appreciate that if there are better ways, but the vibe that I get off the whole conversation is more on the combative side. I'm just not really understanding what the rationale is for this type of a response. And so it's kind of made me think where you know, if we had talked 2 months ago and you asked me what I think of altcoins that do the same thing as Bitcoin but have a slightly different name or slightly different block time, I would have said, I don't think that there's any future whatsoever. I don't, you know, really own any of them. And I think that they're speculative plays that are based on people not really understanding what's going on here. But after watching this exchange between the Counterparty developers and these select Bitcoin developers, it was really interesting, because if the coin that you're trying to build something on, or the coin that you're trying to partner with, doesn't want you on their coin and they're going to actively fight you, there was talk about trying to filter out transactions and basically starting a little bit of an arms race, trying to make it so this protocol couldn't work on the Bitcoin blockchain because they didn't like how it was going to be done on the Bitcoin blockchain. That kind of makes me wonder, what are these, what about the other alternatives that are out there? Suddenly, it's not about the code. It's about whether or not you're going to fight somebody, because working with someone who is going to fight you is dramatically different from working with someone who either isn't going to impede you or might potentially actually help you, might work to help your project succeed in a way that certainly the Bitcoin developers aren't going to do. So it's kind of made me wonder, maybe, again, harkening back to the global reserve currency comment that I made earlier, what if these things just don't scale that vertically? What if, we get to the place with each one of these coins where there's now enough money in it that the stakeholders who got in early feel like, I'm good. We're done with this. It's not doing anything else to it. Very happy with how things are now. And we'll just stay here developing as we see fit because we're the stakeholders. Because then there's nothing actually stopping anyone from starting their own coin. Since all these are basically cultural community sort of memes, doesn't that mean that Bitcoin might just be Bitcoin now, but in the future, it might just be, that might be the old Bitcoin that we talk about. And then there's this new token that isn't making the same sort of conservative decisions and is able to progress faster because it doesn't have all that value behind it. That's
one reason why there needs to be altcoins, is so that people can experiment with not only different, block times and mining algorithms and all that stuff, but different sort of standards for when they're going to make major changes to the protocol and things like that, and different economic principles. And I just think altcoins are important for the simple reason that they're just trying out more ways to do things. It's like evolution of species, it's like an insect isn't necessarily better than like a bird, although they both fly, but they're both, doing different things, and they're using different strategies to live and to survive in their environment.
Right.
Yeah, what matters really is that we're shifting the conversation about the authority of money, and we're building an infrastructure that can support these new decentralized systems of money. And once those two things have happened, then really the different tokens are interchangeable and the platforms have to compete on a global basis. And if they don't fulfill the needs of their users will have a very easy exit and can move to those that do. And that creates pressure to respond to the needs of those who use the currency. Essentially, each one of these systems, because of the decentralized consensus, has to support the consent of those governed by the currency algorithm. And if it doesn't, it will fail, and it doesn't have any power to keep people in by force. So it has to keep people in by persuasion. That's a really good balanced system. The underlying,
that's where I want to be.
Right.
being persuaded and not forced.
But the most important thing to realize is that what we're doing now is not pioneering a specific currency. We're pioneering a new way of interacting with each other, and that transcends every currency in the space. It provides a framework in which currencies can come and go, but the underlying idea, which is disruptive in itself, is this idea of decentralized control and trust. And the currencies are just implementations of that. And to use another favorite quote of mine, nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And the idea of decentralized currency is an idea whose time has come. It has been invented and it will be expressed in a myriad of forms very easily. So there is no lock-in, there is no constraint. And those who have built their wealth on this system hold on to that wealth only for as long as they continue to support the community, the transactions, the interactions between users by supporting that consensus mechanism. And as soon as they try to wrest control away, they will get disrupted by the very thing that built them up.
Maybe the idea that time has come is actually the idea of voluntary and consensual human interactions that are not based on top-down hierarchy and that are completely voluntary, initiated by the people involved.
And the possibility of doing that at scale that has now been proven to be real. And once you know it can be done, why would you do it any other way?
Well, right, unless you're somebody who benefits from having that top-down control, right?
So you only get to be the only user on your lonely little system because everybody else has every incentive to do it the other way. And that's
right in a system where you can't force people to participate, right? Which is where we're going. But in the old systems, you could always force people, or somebody could always force people to participate, but that's changing. And what I'm saying is, I think that's the real idea. Volunteerism is the real idea whose time has come. And maybe just Bitcoin is the technological manifestation of that that's enabling it to really happen.
Yeah,
at scale. Yeah, that's the key. It's a label. So it was always possible to do volunteerism at a local limited scale. But the problem was you couldn't scale the trust mechanism. The blockchain invention allows us now to scale it, and not just scale it within a country, but scale it on a global basis and accelerate its adoption. So yes, the idea, I think you're very right, Stephanie, that is the idea, and Bitcoin is just a tool. It's a technology that enables it to come to full fruition.
Well, if you think about it, it's really not Bitcoin, it's competition. It's just that to this point, competition has either been wildly inferior, something like, a silver coin has a lot of intrinsic monetary value under the ways that we define that in current society. But if you want to use it for the things that you would use Bitcoin for, it's actually quite difficult, both for divisibility and a variety of other reasons. So again, I kind of think that's the interesting part, is that Bitcoin started the conversation. Bitcoin said, okay, so you've got your national currency, you can use that, or you can use Bitcoin. So now you have the choice between a national currency or the internet currency. But what's happening now is that the internet currency, actually, you have all kinds of choices to that too. Just as there isn't one website, there are lots of websites. It's the same thing here. Value, as we've said, is a language. And so it spreads out from there. So I think that it's not really so much about Bitcoin as it is about competition that can't be stopped for arbitrary reasons. There's no such thing as a monopoly of value anymore in the way that has been true for, I would argue, the last 1,000 years of human culture.
Yeah, and that's really important, because as soon as there stops being that competition and the competitive forces, then there are incentives for corruption and sort of monopolization. And you were talking about people always have a choice now because there are so many altcoins. Is that what you were getting at, Adam?
Yeah, people have a choice. Okay. I mean, that even if we say Bitcoin's won, it doesn't really matter because they can't actually do anything wrong with that victory. Because to do anything wrong with that victory would be to lose and sacrifice that victory to someone who is not doing something wrong. I guess that's what I'm saying here. The market kind of keeps things in check, because lacking that, why would you use something that's giving you a bad deal relative to other things? There's no lock-in. There's no ability for anyone to say, oh, well, I'm going to accept this to the exclusion of that. Someone can choose to say that, but again, it's about them looking at their own best interests. But, let's talk about altcoins for a second, because this is kind of an interesting side. So on the last episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin 99, I spoke with Austin Hill and Adam Back, who are two very serious people in the world of cryptography. Adam Back's the father of Hashcash, and Adam Hill, is the father of Hashcash, which is the underlying proof of work that then goes into Bitcoin. And Austin Hill, I believe his company is called Zero Knowledge Inc., founded in the late 90s, working on cryptographic solutions, and just in general, heavies in the space. So, Andreas, you talked with Adam Back in Vegas about the idea of having a side chain or multiple side chains for Bitcoin, where it's basically an alt. It's basically, a merge mined. You mine it using the exact same type of software algorithm, and at the same time as you're mining Bitcoin, but it allows you to do a lot of these experimental features in such a way so that you're not violating what's called digital scarcity. Can you briefly talk about what digital scarcity is and why this is something that they're concerned about?
Well, the idea is that you have a digital token that can be copied easily, but cannot be forged, and cannot be generated easily. And that was the great invention of the proof of work algorithm, is if you cannot generate these things easily, they become scarce. Scarcity then creates value, essentially, by association with either another scarce resource, in this case, electricity, computing power. But also, I think within these coins, it's also brand focus and attention and community around them. Here's the thing. We managed to converge all of these financial functions on a single blockchain, but now we have silos between the various blockchains. And I think what's interesting about the sidechain idea is that can even break down the barriers between blockchains. And if you allow for more fluid movement between coins, you can still preserve digital scarcity, but you allow for a much freer market between the altcoins, which allows for more rapid evolution, more fluid evolution, and less lock-in.
Can we just get really clear for a second on what exactly is a side chain?
Yeah, so a side chain in a nutshell, for those of you who haven't listened to episode 99 yet, is a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain that has slight modifications made to it. So it's actually really similar to an altcoin. But instead of the side chain having its own token, so Bitcoins 2 or something like that, it actually uses the same Bitcoins as are on the main chain. And so you have Bitcoins on the main chain, and you say, okay, well, I'd like to make a bunch of microtransactions. So I'll send my Bitcoins to the microtransaction side chain that has blocks that are so big that my transaction will for sure get in not only in the first block, but it'll actually be in a faster block, a 2.5 minute block or something like that. And I won't have to pay a fee because the blocks are very, very large. And so everything gets included in them, even ones that have no fees associated with them. So this is a good thing from the perspective of people because, again, it doesn't break this digital scarcity concept. There's only 21 million Bitcoins ever going to be created. And so they can essentially, you can have your Bitcoin on the main chain, or you can have it on this side chain or that side chain. And it's basically through a two-way peg is what they're calling it, where the price is fixed on both sides. The exchange rate between each chain is set and can't be changed. So a Bitcoin on one chain is exactly the same value as a Bitcoin on another chain, but it might have different capabilities.
That's the main feature of, in order to understand a sidechain, the key feature here is that while it is like a beta test altcoin, or if it provides a different set of capabilities from the main blockchain, the key here is that you can seamlessly transfer tokens from one chain to another at a pegged exchange rate with a decentralized exchange mechanism. Think of it as being able to trade between altcoins. In this case, both of them are Bitcoin, but they're Bitcoin that behave differently or have different features, but they have the same fixed exchange rate or monetary value. So if you're trying out a new feature on the sidechain, you could move some Bitcoin from the main blockchain into the sidechain, try out some features, and then move some of them back. Think of it like a testnet, which has actual value and the ability to exchange between the two. You can use that for development, testing features, or you can use it to have completely parallel blockchains of multiple coins, but which are all exchangeable in decentralized fashion.
And the benefit to not just having a complete altcoin is that the sidechain is also secured by the network power of the Bitcoin network at the same time through merge mining.
This is a little bit controversial, but yes, merge mining does help it, but there are circumstances in which merge mining is not actually that helpful. So again, I've been having a conversation with Peter Todd, a developer, another Bitcoin Core developer, who's kind of on the other side of this argument and feels like there are trade-offs that are not acceptable, both in terms of complexity of doing something like this, and in terms of, frankly, this is going to actually require an update to the Bitcoin protocol in order to do it too. So it's not a short-term solution. But again, it was from the conversation on episode 99, I have to say, it sounds like this isn't that far out. It sounds like they're putting resources to it and really think that this is a direction to move in. So again, like it's sort of interesting to look at these different approaches that we see people taking towards innovation, because something like Counterparty or Mastercoin essentially takes Bitcoin as the singular blockchain, and it then adds a layer on top of that. And so, over time, you can imagine layers being built on top of that, and it becomes kind of this cake that's built over time that's made up of a bunch of different things, each doing something different, but it keeps getting taller is the point. Whereas this sidechain model is a lot more like a tree in a forest, and the tree grows up, and it's the only tree at the beginning, but then it seeds itself essentially, and then you have a forest that grows over time. As kind of the natural tendency to scale isn't to grow trees that are ever taller, but rather just to grow more trees that cover a larger geographic area.
So since there are only a limited number of Bitcoins that can move between all these different side chains, is it possible that, do we need all these different, I guess I'm just wondering how many side chains are needed. I guess it would be unlimited because each one kind of serves a different purpose, but is each one going to be kind of sparsely populated depending on how many people want to use it? And is that a problem? Because somebody presumably has to store the side chains, or a lot of people have to store the side chains, just like they have to store the blockchain.
Yeah, I'm a little bit unclear on the exact technicals of that, but an interesting part is that an alt chain that, rather a side chain that doesn't have any activity on it won't have any coins on it. So that's, right. I mean, that's aggressively different than an altcoin, where an altcoin launches, and regardless of how many people use it, it's going to have all of the coins that were ever intended to be on it. In this case, it's more like Bitcoin is going to have all the coins on it that will ever be created. But there are all these different flavors of Bitcoin that you can choose to use based on whatever your needs are. So again, I think the question of asking how many side chains there will be, is a good one. But I don't think that there's a good answer yet. I think it's like asking how many altcoins will there be? Probably a lot. And more over time, because we'll figure out more reasons why we need them.
And what about colored coins? I mean, I see some parallels there.
Yeah. Again, colored coins, to the conversation I had with Austin and Adam, basically do the same thing. It's not as bad as Counterparty or Mastercoin because they don't have their own token. And again, it's the idea that a token causes bad incentives, right? A token causes people to want their project to succeed more than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, they might also be invested in that, but the growth potential of it is a lot less than for one of these new coins. So the speculative urge is really very real in the altcoins in a way that it's not necessarily for Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin certainly has speculative zeal all over it, but compared to the altcoins, I would argue that it's a fundamentally different kind of thing.
I agree.
So I think that's what the intent here is. The intent here is to take all of this activity that's going on in the altcoin space and say, okay, well, you could do that, or you could just be interchangeable with Bitcoin. Everybody's going to be used to this, and you can build your project on top of that. So again, I'll be interested to see what Counterparty winds up doing, because certainly for Let's Talk Bitcoin Coin, LTB Coin, we're going to be, we're planning on launching on Counterparty, but we're not really attached to anywhere. We're attached to whatever is the best system for our use over the medium long term. So this might wind up being a better way to do it. Both of them accomplish what I want to accomplish. They both are built on top of Bitcoin, but whatever winds up being it might be much cheaper to do transactions on a side chain. There are all of these potential advantages that as we learn the limitations of just piling everything onto one chain, we're going to be like, oh man, it's great that that's over there. So again, I think that this development in parallel thing is great. And I think that this being able to see what everybody else is doing, but not being able to stop anybody else. And like the worst you can do is just like get into an argument with them and say, no, you're doing something wrong. Stop that. You're being evil. You know what I mean? Like, I think that this is like the best way that something like this could develop, where instead of one person being responsible or several people being responsible, we're just kind of all responsible. And anybody who wants to step up has the opportunity to do so.
BitGive Foundation is a non-profit charitable giving organization leveraging the power of the Bitcoin community to improve public health and the environment worldwide. Help us demonstrate the significant impact of Bitcoin in addressing these critical issues on a global scale. Support international giving in Bitcoin. Please visit our website at www.bitgivefoundation.org. That's www.bitgivefoundation.org.